I think there was parts in the game yesterday where Kelsey Mitchell was playing like everybody was hurt and this was last season. That's what I saw a lot of. It was a lot of Kelsey Mitchell, I'm going to dribble the ball 17 and 18 times to score. That's not it.
That hesitation you just heard. That's not confidence. That's someone trying to convince themselves they made the right choice. And after watching the Fever lose to Dallas in their preseason opener, a lot of people are asking the same uncomfortable question. Was spending $1.4 million on Kelsey Mitchell actually the right move? Because here's what nobody's talking about. Since Christy Sides got fired and Stephanie White took over, Caitlin Clark and Kelsey Mitchell haven't had a single elite game together. Not one. Go back and check the tape from last season's final 13 games. Every time Caitlin went off, Kelsey disappeared. Every time Kelsey caught fire, Caitlin struggled. The so-called Splash Sisters haven't splashed together since the post-Olympic break under a completely different offensive system.
Choose with the Indiana Fever right now. The fact of the matter is, we knew Caitlin Clark and Kelsey Mitchell as the Splash Sisters, but the fact of the matter is, we haven't seen them both playing well at the same time since Christy Sides was the coach. We haven't seen them both clicking on the floor together since the post-Olympic break during Caitlin Clark's rookie year.
This isn't just about one preseason game. This is about roster construction philosophy. When you commit $1.4 million to a single player in a league with a hard salary cap, you're making a statement about your priorities. You're saying this player is essential to your championship aspirations. You're accepting that you'll have to fill out the rest of your roster with bargain bin players and veterans on their last legs. And that brings us to Tiffany Mitchell, or as fans are now calling her, Dantas. Because after watching her performance against Dallas, it's becoming painfully clear that her career is over. She looked completely cooked out there. No lateral quickness, no defensive awareness, no offensive contribution. This is what happens when you spend all your money on 2 stars and hope everyone else can fill the gaps. The Fever had options. They could have spread that $1.4 million across 3 or 4 quality role players. They could have built depth, created versatility, given Stephanie White actual pieces to work with. Instead, they doubled down on the Mitchell-Clark backcourt and prayed it would work.
And I'm not jumping on this, and I'm sure they're going to have some good games together. I'm sure Kelsey Mitchell's going to have some huge performances. She's a big-time player and a big-time scorer. But I said this before, and I'll continue to say this. I think the 1.4 could have been spent elsewhere with a better collection of players to surround Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston with. That's my opinion before the deal was done.
Watch how Kelsey Mitchell played in that Dallas game. Dribbling 17, 18 times before taking a shot. Playing isolation basketball like she's still carrying a team full of injured players and G League call-ups. That was last season's strategy when everyone was hurt and she had to do everything herself. But Caitlin Clark is back now. Aaliyah Boston is healthy. You don't need to be a one-woman offense anymore. And the timing on those backdoor cuts, Caitlin's hitting Kelsey with perfect passes. But Mitchell's going late. She's hesitating, second-guessing, not reading the defense the way she did during that magical post-Olympic stretch. The chemistry isn't there. The rhythm is broken. Here's the uncomfortable truth. They're not running the same system that made them work. Christy Sides had them playing fast, free-flowing basketball after the Olympic break. Lots of movement, quick decisions, both guards attacking in space.
Say about the game.
Caitlin, first of all, how are you feeling after that foul that took you out?
I feel good. Obviously, I thought the refs did a really good job tonight on it, actually, and that's kind of been their focus going into this season is, you know, I know there was a committee of people that...
You know, I said this on the live. I definitely think the officiating has been better. Okay, shout out to so far, so good. The officiating has definitely been tighter. Okay, it's been a quicker whistle, which I think...
Let's talk about what Caitlin actually said here, because she's choosing her words very carefully. She mentions the officiating first, gives them credit for calling things tighter. That's smart politics. But then she pivots to what really matters. Soft defensively and undisciplined. Those are coaching words. That's Caitlin diplomatically saying the defensive system isn't working. And notice what she doesn't say. She doesn't talk about offensive chemistry. She doesn't mention how well she and Kelsey are clicking. Instead, she talks about learning to play with new teammates, Maya Buickers and Monique Billings. That's telling. When your supposed co-star isn't part of the "we're still building chemistry" conversation, that's a problem. Stephanie White was supposed to be a defensive guru. That was the whole pitch when Indiana hired her. She'd tighten up the defense, bring championship-level intensity, turn the Fever into a two-way powerhouse. But they just gave up 101 points to Dallas in a preseason game. The Wings aren't exactly an offensive juggernaut. This should have been a statement game.
This is my thing about the defense, man. That was just some of the things Caitlin had to say about the game. My thing with the defense is, Stephanie White, you're supposed to be a defensive coach. You over here, that's the problem. You over here tinkering with the offense, and you messed it up that you can't even get the damn defense right, and that's what you're supposed to be good at. I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm interested. Let me know. Do you feel like that $1.4 million is still money well spent on Kelsey Mitchell? Get down.
Here's where the $1.4 million question becomes unavoidable. If you're paying Kelsey Mitchell max money, she needs to be more than just a scorer. She needs to be a leader, a defensive presence, someone who makes everyone around her better. But what we saw against Dallas was a player stuck in survival mode, trying to do too much, forcing shots, not trusting the system. Compare that to how other teams spent their money this offseason. Look at what Dallas did, spreading their resources across multiple contributors. Check out how Seattle built depth and versatility. The Fever went all in on star power and hoped it would be enough. And now they're stuck. They can't make major roster moves because the cap space is gone. They can't upgrade the bench because the money's already committed. They're betting everything on Mitchell and Clark figuring it out, on Stephanie White's system eventually clicking, on players like Tiffany Mitchell somehow turning back the clock.
Be worrying about Dantas coming off the bench. There's a lot of things within this roster we wouldn't be having to worry about. But hey, it is what it is. If you wanted her, this is what comes with it. As of right now, I'm not seeing the chemistry flow between Caitlin Clark and Kelsey Mitchell. I feel like Kelsey Mitchell is still playing as if she's out there with Ari McDonald and Odyssey Sims and a bunch of injured aerial powers, random people coming on the team because of the injury crisis. And the fact that
watch this section again and pay attention to what's not being said. There's no confidence here, no swagger, just someone trying to rationalize a preseason loss by calling it a learning experience. And sure, it's just preseason. Teams are experimenting, rotations aren't set, nobody's game planning seriously yet. But the fundamental issues we're seeing aren't about effort or preparation. They're structural. When Kelsey Mitchell is dribbling the air out of the ball while Caitlin Clark stands in the corner, that's not a preseason problem. That's a system problem. When Tiffany Mitchell is getting meaningful minutes despite being completely unable to contribute, that's not a rotation experiment. That's a depth problem. The Fever had the entire offseason to figure this out. They knew what worked last year during that post-Olympic run. They knew the chemistry Clark and Mitchell had when Christie Sides let them play fast and loose. They knew what kind of supporting cast they needed. And instead of building on that foundation, they tore it down and started over with Stephanie White's vision.
Are you happy? Are you happy? If you was a part of the we must give Kelsey Mitchell $1.4 million, I want to know how you feeling right now. Are you happy? This Dallas Wings game, I feel, yes, it's just a preseason game. It's just a preseason basketball.
So let's address the elephant in the room. Was $1.4 million for Kelsey Mitchell money well spent? The people who pushed for that deal, who argued she was essential to Caitlin Clark's development, who said you can't break up the Splash Sisters, are they happy right now? Because here's what that money bought. It bought a talented scorer who's still figuring out how to play within a new system. It bought chemistry that hasn't existed since a different coach ran a different offense 6 months ago. It bought hope that two guards can carry a team despite having almost no reliable depth behind them. What it didn't buy was roster flexibility. It didn't buy defensive versatility. It didn't buy the kind of supporting cast that championship teams need. Look at the WNBA champions over the past 5 years. None of them were built around 2 max guards and a bunch of minimum salary players. They all had depth, versatility, multiple players who could step up on any given night. The Fever are now locked into this construction for the entire season. Kelsey Mitchell's contract isn't going anywhere. The supporting cast is what it is. Stephanie White's system is the system. They're betting everything on this core group figuring it out, finding chemistry, somehow becoming more than the sum of their parts. And maybe they will. Maybe Mitchell and Clark will recapture that post-Olympic magic. Maybe Stephanie White's defensive schemes will start clicking once everyone learns their roles. Maybe some of those minimum salary players will surprise everyone and become legitimate contributors. Maybe Tiffany Mitchell will prove she's not completely done. But right now, after watching that Dallas game, after seeing how disconnected the offense looked and how porous the defense was, after watching Kelsey Mitchell dribble into contested mid-range jumpers while Caitlin Clark waited for the ball, it's hard to feel confident about those maybes. The really frustrating part is that we've seen what this team can be. We watched them during that post-Olympic stretch when everything clicked. Caitlin and Kelsey were both cooking. Aaliyah was dominating inside. The role players knew their spots. It was beautiful basketball, the kind that made you believe this team could compete for championships. But that was a different system with a different coach and different offensive principles. Christy Sides wasn't some tactical genius, but she understood one crucial thing. Get out of the way and let your best players play. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't bog them down with rigid schemes and complex rotations. Just let Caitlin create, let Kelsey attack, and make sure everyone else knows their role. Stephanie White came in with bigger plans. She wanted structure, discipline, defensive intensity, a real system. And there's nothing wrong with that philosophy in theory. Championship teams need all those things. But you can't install a complex system overnight, especially when you're asking your stars to completely change how they play. The chemistry issues we're seeing aren't about personality conflicts or lack of effort. They're about two players trying to coexist in an offense that doesn't maximize either of their strengths. Caitlin thrives in transition and pick-and-roll situations where she can use her vision and passing. Kelsey's best in isolation and coming off screens where she can use her quickness in shooting. White's system is asking them to do different things, play at a different pace, make different reads. And while they're figuring all that out, teams like Dallas are running circles around them. The Wings aren't even supposed to be good this year. They're rebuilding, developing young talent, trying to find their identity. And they just dropped 101 points on a Fever team that's supposed to be competing for playoff position. The defensive issues are particularly concerning because that was supposed to be Stephanie White's calling card. She built her reputation on defensive intensity and toughness, but right now the Fever look lost on that end. Players are getting beat off the dribble, rotations are late, help defense isn't coming. That's not about talent or effort. That's about players not understanding their assignments or not trusting the system enough to commit fully. And when your defense breaks down, it affects everything else. You can't get out in transition if you're taking the ball out of the net every possession. You can't build rhythm offensively if you're constantly playing from behind. You can't develop chemistry when you're frustrated and pressing. The Tiffany Mitchell situation is almost sad to watch. This is a player who had a solid WNBA career, contributed to winning teams, earned her spot in the league, but Father Time is undefeated, and right now she looks like someone who should be coaching rather than playing. No shame in that. Careers end. But when you're relying on a clearly diminished veteran for meaningful minutes because you don't have better options, that's a roster construction failure. This all comes back to that $1.4 million decision. The Fever had choices. They could have let Mitchell walk and used that money to sign 2 or 3 quality veterans who could provide depth and versatility. They could have targeted specific needs, a defensive-minded wing, a backup point guard who can run the offense when Caitlin sits, a stretch 4 who can space the floor. Instead, they chose loyalty and continuity. They chose to keep the Splash Sisters together and hope it works out. And maybe that's admirable. Maybe there's value in stability and showing your players you'll take care of them. But in a league with a hard salary cap and limited roster spots, every decision has consequences. The consequence of paying Kelsey Mitchell $1.4 million is that you're now watching Tiffany Mitchell struggle through minutes she shouldn't be playing. The consequence is having no flexibility to upgrade your roster if things aren't working. The consequence is being locked into this core group for better or worse. So the question isn't whether Kelsey Mitchell is a good player. She obviously is. The question is whether she's a $1.4 million player on a team that also has Caitlin Clark. The question is whether that money could have been better spent building a more complete roster. The question is whether the Fever prioritized star power over team construction. And after watching them struggle against Dallas, after seeing the chemistry issues and the defensive breakdowns and the lack of depth, a lot of people are starting to wonder if Indiana made the wrong choice. Not because Kelsey Mitchell isn't talented, but because in a salary cap league, talent alone isn't enough. You need the right pieces in the right places, playing the right system, with the right supporting cast. The Fever don't have that right now. They have 2 talented guards trying to figure out how to play together in a new system, a dominant center who's not getting enough touches, and a bunch of role players who are either too young or too old to contribute consistently. That's not a championship roster. That's not even a guaranteed playoff roster in a league that's getting more competitive every year. Time will tell if they can figure it out. Maybe by mid-season, everything clicks. Maybe Stephanie White's system starts making sense and the defense tightens up. Maybe Kelsey Mitchell adjusts her game and finds that chemistry with Caitlin again. Maybe some of those young players develop faster than expected. But right now, after one preseason game that exposed every weakness in this roster construction, it's fair to ask, was the $1.4 million worth it? And if you're being honest, if you're looking at what that money bought versus what it could have bought, the answer is getting harder to justify. So drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the Fever made the right call paying Kelsey Mitchell? Or should they have spent that money differently? Because this debate is going to define their entire season, and we're just getting started.